hope that this lesson today will help us to see something very remarkable. Samson's third encounter. That means he had experience in this type of thing. This man Samson was getting ready for the sunset, when the darkness of night would close out a career of a chief of state, of a prime minister, of a king, of a prophet. He was the man that governed the whole of Israel. Here's a man that we see that he played with sin and seemingly won. We notice that in our communities too. His first encounter seemed to make him a hero, you know, because it ended up with so many dead that he had killed. Samson forgot that the story of the devil and of Satan and of Lucifer, that he did not win in heaven, that Adam did not win in the garden. You never win with sin. There's no winning with sin. He eternally lost his relationship with God, which was a tragedy. Samson forgot the whole stories of humanity, that wrong is always wrong and good is always good. He forgot that in the sons of Jacob, they didn't win. It was Joseph that won, who suffered hunger and humiliation, but was the winner. And so Samson, riding alone toward his destiny and his ultimate disaster, that is today's lesson. Samson began to rule when he was about 20 years of age. His elders and his parents taught him his place in history and how he should judge Israel. In Judges chapter 15 and verse 20, it says he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines for 20 years. That's a long time to be in office, as any politician can tell you. In Judges 16:31, his brethren and all the house of his father came down to Gaza, and they took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah, which is right over this way here, and Eshtaol, which is like little kindred towns, in the burying place of Manoah, his father. He judged Israel for 20 years. And now for 3,000 years, men have talked about the life that he lived. This was Samson's third encounter. In Judges 16:4, it says it came to pass afterward that Samson loved a woman in the valley of Sorek. Sorek is just up the way here, and we'll be showing it to you. Her name was Delilah. Samson was directed and guided and influenced by his base emotions and by his solical forces, and not by his spirit, not by his better desires and better forces. He displayed a rebellious spirit, the same one that Adam had when he disobeyed Jehovah. Samson deliberately visited a woman, possibly of disrepute, in the valley of Sorek, very close by where I'm standing at this moment. Her name was Delilah. And you look into your dictionary, and Delilah means the languishing one. That's a good word for a harlot. Don't want to work, just take a man and live with him for an hour or two and make your money. The pining one, when she didn't have a man, long face, sad, and with tears. She's called the weak one. These are all definitions of her name. The weak one. You could tell her what was right. She wouldn't live it. She had no ability to live it. She was also called the frustrated one. What shall I do? What shall I do? Went right back doing the same thing all over again. And the dictionary calls her the lonely one. Sin is always lonely. When you commit iniquity, you're going to have some lonely hours. But this woman, Delilah, in our lesson today, was waiting like a spider waits for a fly for Samson to arrive. She was ready to make deceptive love to this young man called Samson. She was ready to mock him. She was ready to have him captured for her god, Dagon, and for the 5 lords of the Philistines. Yeah, Delilah became the heroine of the Philistines. She conquered their greatest enemy. She did it on her own. Samson was the mighty one. He was the feared one. He was the strong one. and he was lured into a net by one woman who captured him. No doubt Delilah was bedecked with fragrant flowers, all kinds of perfumes, and everything that would make her to be a tempting one when Samson came. So this valley of Sorek is, you might not understand, is right close to Samson's birthplace. It is near Estaol. Samson was always near home with his solitary adventures. One of the three women in Samson's life, the third one, named Delilah, is the only one of the three women that her name is recorded. The other two are nameless. Delilah was a stronger personality than the first two encounters that this young man had. From a baby, Delilah was taught to worship Dagon. Pagan, well, he was no god. He was just a demon that they worshiped, and an idol called the fish god, with a human top and a fish bottom, and of the Philistines. Delilah was willing to sell her body to an Israelite that she wasn't supposed to have any communication with, but her soul she kept for Dagon, the fish god, and her lust she kept for the five lords of the Philistines. No doubt they committed fornication with her too, but they brought her great wealth, and this she wanted. Delilah's loyalty could never be challenged. She kissed, she caressed, she had intercourse with Samson, but her true loyalty was always to a pagan society, to a pagan religion, and to a demon god. The Word of God describes it in Judges chapter 16, verse 4, when it came to pass that Samson loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The lords of the Philistines and the five great cities up and down the coast of the Mediterranean over here, they heard about this, and they came to her and said, Delilah, will you entice Samson and see wherein his great strength lieth? You see, they didn't know where the strength came from. They didn't know Jehovah God. And by what means we may prevail against this man, how we may bind him and afflict him. And then they moved in close to Delilah and said, honey, I want to tell you something. Each one of us five lords will give you 1,100 pieces of silver apiece. Yeah, you can buy a traitor. She sold her lover for silver. That's right. All right. She went to work on Samson. She called him into her room where they had fornication together. And while they were loving and kissing, in Judges 16:6, she said, Samson, would you please tell me wherein your great strength lies? I want to know. Will you tell me how you could be bound or afflicted by the Philistines? And Samson, being a little clever, and knowing that she was a pagan and a heathen, in verse 7 he said, you bind me with 7 green withs. You know, a green withe is a piece of a tree that hasn't been matured in any way or cured in any way, and it's wet and it's quite strong. You can wrap it and use it like a rope. And he said, if you do that with these 7 green withs that have never been dried, I'll be weak like another man. And so they tied him. You know, she had the Philistines right there with her. The enemy was hiding close by. And so she said, the Philistines be upon thee. He jumped up and broke those things, and they were gone. She put him into her arms. She rubbed her breast over the top of him. She kissed him and said, don't you love me? He said, yes, I love you. And in chapter 11, he said back to her, if you bind me fast with new ropes that have never been occupied and never been used, then I will be weak like another man. Because in the second deception, she said, won't you please tell me? If you love me, won't you tell me? And she said, the Philistines be upon you. And he jumped up and he broke them off. And she said, you've deceived me again. So she began to make love to him all over again. Hug him and love him and kiss him and caress him. And then she said, now, you've deceived me twice. Please tell me how you could be like another man. Where is your great strength? So Delilah said to Samson, tell me, wherein is thy great strength, wherewith thou mightest be bound, or you can be afflicted? And then he told her all of his heart. Isn't that amazing? He said unto her, there's never been a razor upon my head. You know, he was giving her his spirit now. He was giving her his secrets. He says, I have been a Nazarite unto Jehovah from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, my strength will go from me, and I will become weak like another man. She sent quickly for the Philistine lord, said, I've got it. I've got it. Come on now. Come on up. Let us look at these three women and see them. These three women, the first one was a type of the world. Nothing morally wrong. He just married a heathen, which he had been told not to do. He was told not to ever marry a heathen, but to love only the people of Israel. The second woman was a type of the flesh. She was a harlot, and she was a whore. And she lived in the city of Gaza, right over here. And she was an open woman that anybody could come by and buy her body. And he went into her, a type of the flesh. It was worse than the world, because that was legitimate. They had a legitimate marriage. And the second one, it was the wild flesh performing. But in the third encounter, our lesson today is the type of the devil. Evidently, Samson could not see that every sin committed dragged him nearer to oblivion. And he didn't seem to realize that. This Philistine woman goes down in history as a temptress, as a manipulator of men, and as a deceiver. Her very name in the annals of history is a token of temptation, of being a temptress, and of a deceiver, deceiving a man that she was making love to him. You say, what motivated her? The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. She was motivated by money. In Judges 16:5, the lords of the Philistines came unto Delilah and said, entice Samson, see wherein his great strength lies, and if you will find it out, we will give you, every one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. You say, how much would that be? The 5 lords of the Philistines really wanted Samson, because I'm going to show you how much it is. In Exodus chapter 30 and verse 12, the word says, when thou takest the sum of the children of Israel after their number, then shall they give every man a ransom for his soul unto the Lord when thou numberest them, and there shall be no plague among them. When thou numberest them, thou shalt give every one that passeth among them that are numbered half a shekel of the shekel of the sanctuary. And so the value of a man was 1/2 of a shekel. A shekel is 20 gerahs, G-E-R-A-H. And a half shekel would be a great offering unto the Lord. Now the law of Moses said that 1/2 shekel could ransom the soul of a man. You could buy a man for 1/2 shekel. Now shekel was weighed money. Right here, we have seen them weigh gold. This week you say, how much is this chain? Rather than saying this chain is $200, before your eyes, they drop it on the scales and say, you see the weight of the gold? Now you know the price of the gold today, and you pay according to the international price of gold. And so gold and silver is still weighed. And in countries like this, you buy things by the weight of the gold that's in them. So a shekel was a standard of weight, and it was weighed money and not a coin. The weight was 11.46 grams of silver. So 2 1/2 shekels would make 1 ounce. Now, to show you how great this was, Micah, a priest of God, was paid 10 shekels a year for his labor. 10 shekels a year as a salary. So 1/2 shekel could buy the soul of a man, and a minister labored for 1 whole year for 10 shekels. You can see what Delilah was getting when she was to receive 5,500 shekels. She could buy an army of 11,000 men. Brother, that was a fortune. That was a fortune. So the high position of a priest was only 10 shekels a year for his labor. And Delilah said, I will take 550 years of work. That was what she was getting. What a bounty for Samson's head. What an awful bounty for Samson's head. Nobody ever wanted so much money so badly as Delilah wanted it. As a harlot, She could never dream of that kind of money. She was now going to become the woman of the year. She was going to become the Miss Philistine, not the Miss America. She was going to become the lady of the Lords. And she was going to have more wealth than anyone around. She was capturing the mightiest man alive. And she succeeded in doing that. Yeah, Delilah was a bounty hunter. In bed with Samson, she whispered, "Samson, do you really and truly love me?" Samson replied, "Yes, I do." She said, "Then reveal to me the secret of your superhuman power that comes upon you." Says, "If you are, and you do love me, then tell me about yourself. We love one another. Tell me the whole secrets." She possibly added, "You know, I won't tell anyone. This is just between you and me." But you know, being a pagan, she thought it was the same kind of magic that could be learned somewhere else in the marketplace. And Samson gave to her all that he had. At first, he told her 3 lies, and then he told her the truth. Now, I want to tell you something very, very strong. Illicit love is never honest. Now, you better remember that. Illicit love is never honest. Anything you can play with a whore, are you women going to play with a fast-moving man driving down the left side of life very strong? You got to know illicit love is never honest love. Never in history has it ever been honest. It's bought with a price and sold on the block very cheap. Delilah the harlot was a liar. She lied to him. She said, "I love you." She did not love him. She loved money. And she was after a mighty fortune of money, not just a little. And Samson, the judge of Israel, lied. He played with her like a toy. "Oh, yes, just give me sex. Yeah, tie me with these green trees here, and I'll be weak. Tie me with these new ropes, and I'll be weak." But notice he was getting closer to his covenant all the time. He said, "Take my locks here and tie them up." See, his head, that's where his power was. There in his locks. He says, "Tie me up, put them in a pin, and when you do, I'll be weak like other men." You see, this was a lie. It was not a truth. And so she lied and he lied. That's the way sin is. And I want to tell you a very strong situation, and it is this. These 2 people died together. She was present. I'm going to teach you about that mighty celebration in our lessons to come. But they died together. If you run with sinners, you'll die with them. If you play with sin, you'll die with your hands full of it. If you live the wrong life, that wrong life will take you down, and you will die in the slop hole of bad and wrong. When I was a young man in my teens, I knew a family named Wilson. They had a beautiful daughter. When she was about 15 or 16, it was in Tennessee. She ran away from home to live a gay life. They never could find her. They searched for her, the police looked for her, they couldn't find her. Maybe 2 years later, the phone rang. On the other line it said, "Daddy?" He said, "Yes." She says, "This is Bonnie." He said, "Yes. Where are you, honey?" She says, "Daddy," says, "I'm in Kansas City." I said, "Daddy, I'm dying of syphilis." Says, "I have syphilis all through my body." Says, "I have been a harlot for these 2 years, and I've been abused by so many men, beaten up, knocked around, and now I'm dying of syphilis. Daddy, I want to die in your arms. Will you come and get me?" Old man Wilson, a farmer, jumped in his car in Tennessee. He drove like a wild man to Kansas City, to the address she gave him. He ran up into that dirty, dinky, filthy apartment place. He threw open a door. Wilson was an enormous man. Must have weighed 250 pounds or 260 pounds. He looked in, there in the bed was not the flush, beautiful, darling girl 2 years before, but just the bones of a poor little girl rotting from social disease. He didn't stay. He was a man of action. He threw a sheet around her, ran out of that room, put her in his car, drove like a madman. I lived in their home. I knew this family so well. Drove like a madman. Brought her back to Mama. Put her in the bed. She looked up and said, "Daddy, I'm dying." He says, "Oh, don't say that, honey." Yes, she says, "I'm dying." Oh, he said, "Don't say that, darling." She says, "Daddy, I'm dying." And says, "Daddy, can you set me up higher in the bed?" Well, he said, "Yes." He put more pillows and put her up higher. She said, "Daddy, my feet are so hot." He said, "Why?" She says, "Well, I see hell below me, and my feet are already in hell." Oh, he said, "No, no, no." She says, "Yes, Daddy." He says, "My feet are in hell." She said, "Can you put me higher?" He pushed her higher in the bed. My brother was standing right there in the room at that time, and she began to cry and said, "Daddy, push me a little higher." She says, "I'm burning." It says, "I've been so wicked. I've been so mean. I've been a liar. I've been a thief. I've been a harlot. Daddy, I sold my soul." What are you going to do with your soul? What are you going to do with your soul? Are you going to be a Samson? Are you going to play with harlots? Are you going to play with prostitutes? Are you going to play with evil men full of the devil? I'm bringing you these programs that we can learn something from Samson, the loner. If he'd have stayed with friends, he'd have been another man. If he'd have stayed with the governing body of Israel, he could have made a great leader. He could have made a great champion. He could have made a mighty general of the army with all of his people behind him. But he didn't. He played the game alone. He didn't have a friend with him when that woman was playing him for a sucker. If he'd have just had a friend that had said, "Come on, Samson, it's time to get out of here, man. They're about to take your life. They're about to take your strength. She's a spider, and you're almost in the web. Come on, let's get out of here." No, he was a loner. He played the game of life all alone, and he was deceived by a woman in his third encounter of life. He had played with the world, and he won. That might be you. He played with the flesh, and he won. That might be you. But when he played with the devil, he lost. And that might be you. I want you to give your heart to God right now. I want you to come off of drugs. I want you to come off of alcohol. I want you to come off of illicit sex. Sex outside of marriage will destroy you. It'll destroy a family. It'll destroy a nation. It is a destroyer. It's deceptive. It is not honest. It is not true. It's full of lies. I beg you now to come to God, to come to Jesus, to give your life to Him, and let your life get straightened out, and let's go to heaven together in Jesus' name.